What does that co-creation of norms look like, and how have you found its effectiveness compared to that like mandated, these are the rules that you're going to follow?
Okay, so the way it works is um, being able to get student inputs all the way from the ideas and how they want the class to look like. And it also create a sense of belonging and community because they will keep each other accountable what will happen. And they also feel honor of those policies. Right? Um, One thing is also that the way I do it the previous years help to have students who talk to speak and also the one who are relenting to talk to be able to write down their ideas. So that's what I can say.
Have you found that that co-creation of like your classroom norms has been more effective, less effective, equally effective as the way that you were doing it before?
Yes, it's definitely more effective because of this sense of belonging. Because it's something that they create themselves. Uh, and we have it in the classroom so they know that if they break the rules and they make those are rules that they make themselves, they know the consequences, right? So so yeah, it's easier, make the class management easier.
Dre, I could not hear you for a second. I don't know if that was just me though.
Uh, nope, it was not just you. I turned off my camera instead of unmuting myself. So thank you for starting us off right, Matthew. We're going to go ahead and jump into our DPS connections. Pete's going to take it away.
Yeah, so we talked about this briefly earlier, but the two parts of CRE mindset that this presentation is going to focus on is global context and building relationships. We kind of are talking about some examples of co-creating. When you're co-creating, you're both creating a place where everyone's previous experiences, no matter where they're from or where they are, is able to contribute to this co-creation, especially if we're co-creating norms or we're co-creating curricular materials or we're co-creating anything in our educational environment. And then also when we are co-creating, that is also a means to an end of building relationships. And so that when you are, instead of having somebody tell you something and then thus the relationship is I'm in charge and you are not in charge and have to listen to the rules I say, when we're co-creating, we are establishing relationships like through that act of co-creating. Also briefly, just want to touch on the priority school actions alignment. I think it's pretty obvious that if as opposed to something that is being told to you, if you have a say in those norms, and if you have a say in the things that you're doing in the classroom, that is going to be a more safe and welcoming environment. It's certainly going to be one that you feel more a part of, ideally. And also it's going to be something that will foster people wanting to go to school. So you'll see increased attendance. If you, instead of disciplinary measures being something that are top down, if there's something that everybody has agreed to, ideally you would see better discipline in your classroom. And then lastly, just want to touch briefly in slide 37 on another important thing to think of when we're co-creating is that all students have different needs and that a co-creation process responds to those different needs that every student has. Because if we're co-creating correctly, then those students have an opportunity to express those needs, and those needs are being fulfilled in your co-creations.
Okay, so we warmly welcomed you earlier. We've grounded in our DPS priorities, and now we're going to get into the meat of things. So we're going to talk about co-creating norms and spaces with students, and some family involvement can jump in there too. And we're going to really focus on the why, the what, and the ways in which you can do this. Now, you'll notice that we're not just focused on co-creating norms. So I know both of you were here last year where this was a whole session on just norms at the beginning of the year. We've opened it up to different ways that you can co-create different avenues of communication that will reach broader audiences. So we don't want this to be a session where, you know, you do this co-creation of norms once in August and then you never revisit it again. And it's kind of just like one of those beginning of the year things that falls off the ladder. This co-creation process can happen throughout the year in a bunch of different aspects.
So briefly, before we get into ideas that Drea and I have put together of ways that we could co-create, I was kind of briefly talking about this, but I would be interested in hearing what you all have to say about why take the time to co-create, and if you have done that before. Michelle, I know that you were saying earlier that this is new for you, but if you have, or even just not in a school environment, but just anywhere in your life, like what strategies have been successful in co-creating or establishing things with other groups of people?
Well, I'm sure I have done this. I just was thinking about it in a different way. I don't know. I'm just actually just thinking about what I was doing with my student assist this last year and how we kind of pull together and we talk about different things that needed to be achieved in the library or whatever. And a lot of it was figuring out who had what strengths and letting them say, hey, I'll take this, or I can do that, or just based on what strengths that they had. And then I noticed in that way, if we kind of focused on that, they were able to accomplish a lot more because they took the work and broke it up and they had choice in what it was that they decided to work on. So in some ways, I guess that was something that worked for us.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Figuring out like your student strengths and leveraging those strengths and having them figure out what their strengths are, like that's so critical to, you know, postgraduate life. So great job, Michelle. And then Matthew, you kind of talked earlier about allowing different options for students who might not be as vocal in class to have written ideas. Can you speak a little bit more on that?
Yes, sometimes you have students that they don't like to speak, but they have ideas that they can share. So having a platform where they can also share their ideas is very important. So putting in place different ways of getting the ideas before creating the rules was important for me at that point.
Yeah, that's a really cool and like good key point to highlight, is that if we just have one method of collecting ideas or engaging students in this collaboration process with each other, it really excludes a chunk of students who could have really good ideas but just aren't comfortable with that method of expressing them. All righty. So just based off of like our conversations and what we've seen so far, I think we can skip this chunk of the video because we're already on board with co-creation and like the importance that it has. So we've hit all of these in different aspects already. So I'm just gonna like breeze over it so that we have some more time for play later on. And I did just want to quickly hit the difference between rules and norms. So rules are typically like our top down, like you must follow this, like there is no wiggle room in that, like this is the expectation, end of story. Whereas norms or social contracts are these like co-constructed expectations that you can co-create with students, with different community members that are going to interact in the space to make the environment that you need for everybody to be successful. So a good example would be like, you might have a school-wide rule of first 10, last 10. There's no like people in and out of the hallways before/after, or before the first 10 minutes of class has started or after the last 10 minutes of class is wrapping up. That might be something that you have no power in negotiating. However, the time in between those 2 10-minute chunks is a great way for you to negotiate with your students, come up with some expectations of what does it look like to leave the classroom space, and like what is that process. I think you're going to have a lot more traction if you engage students in that conversation instead of saying like, you will do this at this time in this place.
So then we have some slides where Dre and I were coming up with ideas, specifically using like technology that we could embrace co-creation and that we could foster co-creation. A lot of the ideas that we have are specifically using Canva, and Drea is going to get more into that in the next slide. Matthew and Michelle, have you all used Canva before? Is that something that you all are familiar with? Or
So I'm horrible at it. And this is where I had a student assist who is great. And I'm like, there you go. This is your job the whole year. Because I really don't enjoy it all that much.
Okay, well, hopefully
it's a great tool. It's just not fun to create with it for me.
Okay. Well, maybe we can provide you with some ideas that'll make it more enjoyable, or we'll make it more enjoyable for your assistants who you're co-creating with. And Matthew, you're not really familiar with it, it seems.
Not either. Yeah.
Okay. The main thing that we're going to be hitting on is templates, because one of the biggest assets that Canva has are the templates, which make it very easy for us to just like plug and play many different like book recommendations, newsletters, posters, blogs. They have this list here of just like some ideas that we put together, but we're about to show you some more specific examples. And we're going to give you some time to play too, hopefully.
Yes. So like Pete was saying, a lot of our, like the tool aspect part of this is really going to be focused on Canva use. And when you first get into Canva, especially if you're like doing some self-exploration and you just open up a blank template, there's so much stuff that it can be super overwhelming. And I've seen a lot of people look at it and say, this is not for me, and then like shut it down and not open it up again. But I think the easiest thing to do when we're getting started is to utilize templates. And you'll see that we've hyperlinked some resources into templates. They have thousands and thousands and thousands of templates, which also you can get lost in. But it's a really good starting point so that you don't have to like build from the ground up. And so it's less daunting. One of the things I really like to use Canva for is their whiteboards. So these are essentially just like endless pages. They go forever and ever and ever. I can add pages to them so that we can sort by topic if I need to. And I can have all of my students collaborating on one whiteboard. So I can open this up to small groups. I can open it up to full class. I can open it up so that all of my classes can interact and collaborate on the whiteboard. And so you see that I have a GIF going here. You can add sticky notes, text, graphics, all of that stuff. And I can see in real time who's adding what. And so that makes it really nice, as opposed to Jamboard is really similar in features that you can use here. However, it's a little bit harder for me to keep track of who's adding things in Jamboard compared to Canva. So for the collection of ideas, I love using whiteboards. There's also a whole bunch of worksheets that you can search up in their toolbar for templates that you can change, collaborate on, do all of that stuff. And then you can push this out either via Schoology if you want to keep it digital. Sometimes what I like to do is just like find worksheets on Canva, like graphic organizers and stuff, and then print them so that students have access and then can like utilize them via paper if they're more comfortable writing it out, or they just like, again, it's a mind map. So you do what you do to make it important and insightful for you. The other thing, so once we figure out our ideas, we get them all together, we have our classroom norms, what our expectations look like, I need to somehow display them. Canva's really great at making professional looking posters, flyers, graphics, all of that stuff. So I can also have students collaborate on this and co-create them together. So we've co-created our norms, and now I can have them co-create in small groups the different like components of them. So either I can have them make full classroom norm like flyers, and we can vote as a class on which one we're going to utilize, or I could split it up into the different norm sections. So I can say like, you're going to take norm 1, you're going to take norm 2, you're going to take norm 3, and then they can add in some like what to do versus what not to do situations, and then like what is a natural consequence for this one. So it really like gets them engaged, and it puts some ownership back on them for these policies. Plus, I get really high quality looking stuff that I don't have to spend hours and hours and hours doing myself. The other thing I really like about it is that there's a bunch of different export options. So even if I want to print these out as flyers or posters that I hang in my classroom, I can also send them out to families so that families know what the expectations are. Or I could print individual flyer copies for back to school night. Like, my opportunities are endless. Now, like I said earlier, we're shifting a little bit from last year to where we're not just focused on norms, but like what are other aspects that you can co-create with students to communicate out their progress in class. So one of those things can be having students co-create rubrics or name criteria for success, create performance descriptors, taking something that's like a district created rubric for competencies that's written like very robustly in non-student friendly language, and having them go through those key components and problem solve with team members about, you know, what does this actually mean and what does it look like to be meeting expectations on this point of the rubric. And then we can utilize those student created rubrics over the district verbiage. And then also like allowing them some time for self-assessment and self-reflection. They can show where they are right now, and then we can either, you know, share that and conference with each other, me with the as a teacher, them as a student, or I can also share it out during family conferencing time so that everybody has a clear idea of where you're at. Other thing is you can allow them choice in what they learn. So through choice words, different topic recommendations or book recommendations. You can also include community aspects in this. So you can have parents submit interest or information about students. It's really great for younger kids that neither of you have, but maybe even like getting in some parent insight as to like, you know, what's important, or like what sports are they in, or what do you want them to get out of this class? As a parent, like what would you like to see? How would you like to be involved? That sort of thing. You can go ahead and loop them in and loop their voices in to create these overarching themes. So you can make these student interest surveys on Canva, Google Forms. There's a ton of different platforms that you can use, but the big thing is, you know, bringing those in and then reporting out where they're at when you report it out. So maybe you're having them do some self-reflection, pushing out report cards to parents, but like having that reflection aspect, again, that takes some of the load off of you to do it. You're not having to do 200 now, and instead you're just like running through what people have said. And also like this provides a space for TSEAL skills. So like one of GW's like grading policies, at least from years previous, is that like practice or like soft skills weren't counted in towards the grade. This can be a way that you can communicate out students' progress, not only to them, but also to other stakeholders. So like maybe MTSS providers, maybe SPED coordinators, maybe, you know, other players that you work with, or parents and families. You can, you know, create this communication line of where students are at above where they're at in terms of academic content with standards, or with academic content with standards, all of the above, all of the things.
We also put together some ideas for newsletters. Newsletters could be used for any sort of school community that you're a part of, whether that be the library or your classroom. Newsletters, I think, though, it's important to note, don't have to be something where the teacher or the adult is the only person communicating things in the newsletter. I think Canva makes it really easy for you to collaborate in a newsletter. This sample that I made for Pura Belpre School Library in Library Town, USA, they have the student co-creation that they have in their newsletters. They have a book review part where students can submit book recommendations. This newsletter also has a joke of the week. It doesn't have to be a joke of the week. It could be a poem that a student has submitted. It could be a literary event that, I'm just thinking library world, it could be a literary event that students want people to know about. There are, and I'll get it more into it in the next slide, but in Canva, there are book recommendation templates that are really easy to use that students can use to share books that they enjoy. There's also literally our joke templates. So there really are all sorts of templates here on Canva. We don't need to really get into it here, but if you're interested in learning more about specifically library newsletters, Michelle, this article, which I believe was on a blog from ASLA, he has tips for writing library newsletters, which I thought were really cool. He was putting together, he was like coming to a library space that I believe had been sort of unused for a while. And he was like re-upping its use, and school newsletter was part of that. And so I was pretty impressed by the things that he was putting together. But yeah, I really love that colorful library template though, specifically. Like I said earlier, there are book recommendation templates. One thing that I see in our libraries that I really enjoy seeing are student book recommendations put around the library. I think like this specific template would be really good for that. Because that way in schools, you're told a lot what to read. And I think that if you have the opportunity to be told or have a book, I guess recommendation is a nicer way of saying it. If you have a book recommended by a peer or just another community member, I think that can be a really positive thing. Eventually, it'd be really nice if we could have, especially if you're in a classroom environment, you could create a class reading list out of these book recommendations. So not only do we have a list compiled by the members of our class of things that we think it would be nice for other people to read. I really like that template, but there are other templates as well. That could be something that just people are adding to, similar to the whiteboard that we were showed earlier. And then lastly, I really wanted to highlight the work of the Greenwood Library. Their librarian there is Bonnie Pringle, or she's a para. And two really cool things that she was doing that inspired me is she had a spooky story contest in October where she had students submit spooky stories. And then this summer, she had a graphic novel contest where students had the opportunity to write graphic novels over the summer, and they'll be judged when they come back to the school year. I think one thing that I would add on to this, though, to really make it co-creating is I would love to see student-centered, student-created works like actually in our libraries, whether that be like in the actual school library or in our classroom library. DPS used to make publications of student poetry that were co-created by students. And I think like getting back to that sort of co-creation would be really positive for our library environments. I have comic templates, scary story templates, story creation templates that are linked in there. There also is a book that we have on Sora that the link is in there by Nathan Hale about how to make a graphic novel that I think is really can support students if this is something that they're interested in. Another specific idea that I had that would be really fun, I think, is if you all are familiar with like Exquisite Corpse, that game where you have a piece of paper and then somebody draws like the part of a figure up top, then they fold over the paper so you can only see a little bit, and then another person draws like the torso based off of what they can see from the head, then they fold the paper over, and then somebody else makes the legs based upon only what they can see from a little bit of the torso, and then you have like a funny figure at the end. I think that same kind of concept could work in a comic where you print it off. There's lots of different comic templates in here, both ones similar to the one that's linked here, where they actually provide you with like characters and you make your own scenarios, or ones where you can just draw your own things in there. I would love to see comics made co-created by students, though, where someone does the first panel, they pass it off to their second friend who makes the second panel, who then covers the first panel, passes it off to another person who does the third panel, so on, and then see what kind of comic you create. I love doing things like that. So those are some ideas we have of just like ideas that we had after looking at all of the different templates that are available in Canva.
Okay. Well, so that's like us talking at you. And now we can open it up to whatever you are going to find most valuable this time. The only thing that we ask is that at 3:40, we return to the main room. I will also drop that link in the chat, but this is our time for you to either explore resources, ask questions, bounce ideas, do what you need to do. So Pete and I will be here. We're going to go ahead and just like mute ourselves until y'all have questions, and otherwise go explore resources and ask away. We are here as resources for you.
Okay, so the slide deck that you shared, is that on that main slide deck also, or?
Yep, so all of the slides that we just covered are in the main slide deck, starting at, I think, slide 30-ish.
Yeah, because I wanted to explore some of those links. Like I said, I've used Canva and I always get so frustrated with it because, you know, it shows that there's supposed to be so many things you can do, and they'll be like, I'll be looking at these little things you can add in, and then they're like, oh, that one's not available. And I'm like, okay, how come all the stuff I want to do, I can't actually access?
So have you accessed recently, or are you talking about like your previous experiences with Canva?
So this last school year, when I got in, it just seemed like there was so many things, you know, they'd have like the little, I don't know, icons or whatever that you should be able to add in, but as soon as I clicked on it, it wouldn't be, there was nothing really there. I don't know.
And it'd be like, you got to pay for this. So,
but see, I know I'm in through the district, so I'm like, I should have a free access as educator.
Yes, you 100% should. And as long as you're logging with your DPS credentials. So like, I'm going to switch my screen right here, and I'm going to share this tab instead. You should have this Denver Public Schools little banner here, and that means that you are within our network. You should get all of the premium features.
Okay.
The only thing, and I will say that with our shift to our new ATM reporting process and the updates that are Google and all of that, some of the third-party apps are no longer available for people to use, which is a little frustrating, but all of the regular like graphics, backgrounds, all of that stuff, you should have access to.
Okay. Yeah, like I said, I have students that enjoy doing it. I spend way too much time on this. For me, it becomes a time waster. Even though I know it's supposed to save you time, it doesn't. For me, it doesn't. And I don't know if it's what it is, if I'm a perfectionist, if I wanted to do things that it's not capable of doing or what, but yeah.
So I will tell you, like, also speaking as someone who will spend 3 hours getting the exact right font, that it's a component of Canva. So like, there isn't anything that I haven't been able to do in Canva. Like, Canva is a very robust platform. It's more about like having the time to figure out how to do it, and then also letting go of some of the perfectionist tendencies / spending more time finding a template that I want to use so that I don't have to deal with the like font selection and building things from scratch and figuring out what pairs well with what, the color schemes. Like, using those templates and then just changing little bits is much more effective than me building from scratch.
Yeah. I think my girls, they were pretty good at figuring it out and a little bit more patient than I am. So yeah, like I said, I handed it to them and they did mostly what I needed. So and
Well,
the
also
rest I
good
let
skills
go.
for them to learn, because I know a lot of like nonprofits and for profits actually utilize Canva for advertising and for social media campaigns. Like, it's a good thing to put on your resume that you are familiar with using Canva.
Well, and that's what I told them. I said, there's different things that you guys can use this for, and go ahead and build your skills with this. And so the one student was really good at it, and so she was working with another one and teaching her how to do it. And so I'm like, okay, you guys run with it. This is good for you. I'm too old.
Look at that collaboration that you're facilitating. It's
Yes.
great.
The library was kind of nice. There was a lot of different things I allowed them to do, and I taught them how to do in my library. I'm like, I let them do the laminating and stuff like that. I'm like, now you can do that when you go to college, if you go to the print office or whatever it is. So I'm like, use these skills.
Now, I know that a couple of years ago you were interested in like communicating out library events that you were doing, like to the larger community. And I know we talked a little bit about using Google Sites for that. Have you gone anywhere else with it? I know that was pre-COVID that we talked about that.
So I have created a library website. As far as getting things out, I'm still not great. So I just saw your template for the newsletter, and that's something I need to be better about. But I agonize over writing a stupid email. So doing a newsletter, I'm like, are you kidding me?
Well, Pete, do you want to talk about like different ideas of newsletter incorporation? Because I think that the worst thing to do is to put everything on the teacher and say, like, write this newsletter every week, because we don't have time for that. So, Pete, what do you recommend?
Yeah, I mean, I think it goes back to the student created content, and you're at GW. I think I missed the very beginning. Is that true?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yes.
so you're in high school. We had a GW intern this summer.
Oh, nice.
She was awesome.
Cool.
But I think like getting it to be just something, that you don't necessarily have to be doing. And I think like even if it's I almost, instead of making my example like elementary school example, I almost made it more like a high school example. And I think one thing that and what I was going to run with is, instead of calling it a newsletter, going more for like calling it like a literary journal or something like that, even if it has events in there, like how you style it. Cause I do think that, newsletter just has different connotations for different ages of students. And I think like ways that you can make it like seem more appealing. I would love to see, and I think that I don't know specifically about GW, and I haven't had a chance to meet you yet, Michelle. So it's great to see you in this meeting.
Right.
But I would love to see more opportunities where students have places where students have the opportunity to like share work that they're doing. And I think like the library newsletter can be that. I think that can mean anything. Like we know that library books are not just limited to writing. So that doesn't have to be poetry or a short story. That can be just like, hey, student X made something in their art class and they love it. And they want to they took a picture of it and we're including it in our library newsletter. I think that because libraries like encompass everything, then like a library newsletter can also like encompass everything. And if we're making libraries just like hubs of what students are doing, like that's a really productive school library. I mean, you know a lot more about your library than I do, Michelle, but so I think those ideas I was having as I was contemplating making a high school example was like calling it something else, maybe like, delving into the like when I've done my background is in public libraries, and when I would do programs for like writing programs, I would always play up the like beat cafe theme and like poetry vibe. I don't know if that's something that appeals to you or not, but that's probably like the direction that I would go. But I think that also just like any opportunity that you have to highlight new materials that are coming into your library, that's another thing and I think that even a way that you could co-create this is like, that doesn't have to be a book that you pick. Like you're going to get your mill levy order in, and do you have students who are willing to like, hey, do you want to read one of these books and write about it for our library newsletter? And I think that would be I think an emphasis that Chelsea and I are trying to have is like having more things where having more library things where students are setting the example of like how to use the library, and like where like real students can show how the library can be beneficial, like really beneficial in their real lives. This is a little bit of an aside, but like one thing that we want to do is like have videos, like right now up on our YouTube page, we have videos that were made during the pandemic of library staff members showing people how to use Sora. Like it would be great if we could have videos that students have made where they're showing students how to use Sora.
Yes, because I hate doing videos. There's a lot of stuff I hate doing. So no, so actually, as you're talking, I was thinking, so in the past I've had like a library club where it's students that help advise, it's an advisory type club for students to, what do you want to see or do in the library? And I haven't had it since before the pandemic. I mean, that was the last time, because I kind of haven't been a librarian for the last couple of years. I've been doing credit recovery in the library. So I was thinking, well, maybe I could start that up this coming year and see if I could get those students to do the newsletter. And now historically, I've had a hard time trying to get kids to do reviews for me. That's been kind of an interesting thing, but maybe there'll be somebody that would be willing to do one. If not, I could do that piece and they can do the rest.
What kind of, if you mind me asking, like what kind of strategies have you employed to try to get, not that I have like a lot of them up in my head, that would be great, but like what kind of strategies have you?
Well, at one point we were getting books from like Tattered Cover. They were donating books.
Okay.
And they were able, the students could keep them. All they had to do was read it and write a review. So that was one thing. Yeah.
That was a program that Tattered Cover had on, or that you?
And I started, it was over at TJ when I was first at TJ. And the previous librarian had gotten it started. And so we continued. But it was all ARC books. So
yeah.
So I couldn't put them on the shelf. And of course, Tattered Cover couldn't use them either. But it worked nicely for that.
So that's why they were giving them away.
Yes, definitely. Because some of them had some mistakes, and but otherwise that worked to a certain extent. But every year you get a different group of kids, and some like to write and some don't.
Yeah.
So,
well, I think another thing though would be that, and I think that they were kind of more talking about this in other groups, but like the reviews also don't have to be written. I think that's another important thing. So like if these newsletters, especially if you're not printing out these newsletters, if they're just going to be like, if they're just going to be sent out online, like we could have reviews that are done in video format. We could have a review that's done in a comic format. We could have a review that's done in a picture. I mean, I think all of those things are responding to reading through another kind of medium.
Sure.
I think is a positive way to respond to writing.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Yeah, but I am trying to think of how like you could entice people to review books.
Yeah.
You go.
I say, I think sometimes they think too big and they make them too large of a review, and it's like I think part of it is I'll just have to go back with training and don't have to make it that big of a deal. Just 2 or 3 sentences even is enough.
Yeah.
So
the New York Times, I know they write big book reviews, but every Sunday they just have and you may be familiar with this, but they have like 5. They have one article every Sunday that's just like I think 5 books that they just rapidly review, and they're like in 3 sentences.
Yeah.
And those are they're literally professional book reviewers. So
well, and really most people won't read it if it's longer than that. So, but then the other thing I was looking at doing this year is starting to do, I don't know, once a month or once a quarter. I'm not quite sure yet, but doing a craft center in the library, kind of a makerspace type thing. And so I thought, well, that's something else that we can highlight, saying, oh, this is what's coming up in the library. This is our next craft, or different things that they could just add in.
Yeah. Have you used the Makerspace kits that we have?
I have not.
Okay. That have you I can connect you with Alyssa if you're interested in those, because we have like more than 100 makerspace kits, I believe, that
Very
you
cool.
you could just set them on a table, and then there you have an activity.
Yeah, that'd be great, because in the past I've spent a lot of money on doing the crafts.
Okay. Yeah. Well, yeah.
Yeah.
I can connect you too.
Okay.
And she can give you more information. We also just got like a D&D kit, which I'm really excited about.
Ooh, and we've got a lot of D&D kids.
Yeah. Well, and that D&D is like co-creation. So like, it's like, cool.
Huh? Okay. Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, so that gives me some ideas. Sorry, Matthew, that I just took over everything.
No problem. You're good. Thank you.
Us library people. Oh, is it about?
You still have over 10 minutes. I just wanted to make sure it was there for when you wanted to navigate back. But again, continue to ask questions, go through resources, do what you need to do. I'm in no way kicking you out.
Okay, good. So library question for you, Pete. Do you know, is there going to be somebody that will be over like all of our statistics this year? So in the past, we had somebody that was running all of our like SORA stats, how many students were checking out SORA books every single month. And last year we didn't have that all. So do you know if anyone will be over that this year? That was extremely helpful.
Previously, someone was like sending you a report of monthly of how much SORA stuff or
yes.
How much. Okay, interesting.
Because otherwise we don't have access unless you all send it to us.
Okay. Yeah, I did not know that previously happened. So thanks for letting me know about that. I don't think that would be too difficult for Chelsea and me to. We're going to hire a third library coordinator very soon. So we'll be a complete team, hopefully in 10 days or so. But yeah, let me write that down, because that's not difficult information to procure like on our end.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, Chelsea, I started asking her every month, starting like in January, and so she was starting to pull that for me.
And she was just sending that to you individually?
Yeah. But
okay.
In the past, they had a whole spreadsheet that had every school and had the numbers on there for every month. And I look forward to it every month. How did we do?
Do you know if that was coming from SORA or is that coming from DPS?
I have no idea.
Okay, fair.
I think that's something Amanda did.
Well, and she is the person we're hiring in place of, so it makes sense that we don't that I don't know about that. Okay, yeah, I'll write that down, and we can certainly, at the very least, keep on sending those to you while we figure out how we can get that scale that to everybody.
Yeah, because I was just getting ready to request that for the summer, or for what has already come through.
Okay, you would like that information.
And the reason for that is I give it to my evaluator, and it's helpful for him to see that I actually do something. So I have they like all that hard data stuff.
They do.
Oh, and then one other thing, and I don't know, there used to be an ETLS website that was wonderful and had everybody's names and everything. I don't know if we still have that. So much has changed in the last few years. But is it possible to have that come out again? Kind of like what you guys did, the introduction at the beginning today. Everybody in a face is really helpful because we don't see you on a day-to-day basis. A face, a name, and what it is you do. And that's all of library services. Because like I said, it's changed so much that I'm always, I don't know who I'm sending emails. They say the library help desk, which is great, but I like to something better, more specific than library help desk.
Yeah, certainly.
I know the EdTech team has one, but I think that it would be super helpful for library services to have one as well. We can talk to Felicia about that.
They said we used to in the past, and then things have gone, everything has changed a lot in the last few years. So
yeah, and we're also, Michelle, hopefully, well, and we this is like in the planning stages. We're hoping to have a meeting with everybody who is working in a library, regardless of position, sometime in September.
Okay.
So everybody can, and I know you're talking about more like a newsletter thing, but I am aware, and you're not the first person to tell me that, like, just because of turnover, that like people feel really disconnected from what's going on here at Acoma.
Yeah.
And it's not really, doesn't really seem to be like anybody's fault necessarily, just like,
No, it's just turnover.
New people coming in.
Yeah.
And so we
Yeah, because
definitely
it used to be Susie and Tom and Lori that were my big go-tos, and Susie's now at state level, and Lori just left, and I'm hoping Tom is still there.
Yes,
Tom is still here.
Tom's still here. So I want to just put that out there, so that's on your radar. Because I would love to have an opportunity for like just like for everybody to be in the same room, even if just so like a para who's working at a school by the airport can meet a para who's working at a school, next to the mountains, and you can just see each other face to face and be like, hey, we do the same job. Maybe we can share things together. But I also, oh dang, I had a second thing. Oh yeah, but then the library help desk, like it, that, just so you know, that is Josh Mack, who all those emails, you may have already been aware of that, but those are going to a person. And he, in that email, those emails do reach us very quickly, but also I think, is Chelsea the person who you've been working with?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So she is your point person. So emailing Chelsea, and you can also email me. Certainly, I'm not trying to push off work onto her. But she is your point person, and so those are two, library help desk and Chelsea, are good, are still good places for you to contact.
Yeah, and this is helpful because, like I said, with libraries, we are all by ourselves out there, and sometimes it gets a little lonely. So it's nice to know, like, we have nobody in our schools who understands or identifies with what we do. I don't leave my cave all that often. And so having somebody in the district, like I said, I used to have a lot of librarians that I used to be on the review crew, and we'd meet once a month, and it was wonderful. But they all retired, and the review crew went away, and now I'm like, I don't know who's out there anymore. So.
Well, as I said earlier, you will have one person in your building who is now very familiar with library services. And your GW student even helped me a lot, because the DPS high school top 100 is about to be done, and she helped a lot with that. So that was awesome.
Cool.
Yeah.
And who is it this can be in my building?
I don't know if I don't know the rules on saying. Okay. Yeah. It's Kate Duffy.
Duffy. Okay. I think I know who that is.
She's going to be a senior.
She should be a senior.
Okay. Cool.
She was awesome.
Sounds great. I'll just see if I can get a hold of her
this summer.
Okay. Nice.